Good morning, and welcome to week number 5, lesson number 10 for Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. If you remember, in the last video, we finished chapter 9, which was pretty short, called The Never Bird, and that was in tangent with chapter 8, which was called The Mermaid's Lagoon. And in chapter 8 and 9, Peter and the Lost Boys, including Wendy, were in the Mermaid's Lagoon when a couple of pirates came and left the Redskins' chief daughter out to die on Marooner's Rock. Peter and Wendy and the Lost Boys saved her through some Peter Pan trickery, and then they got into a little scuffle with the pirates. The scuffle left Peter and Wendy pretty weak, and so Peter and Wendy were going to die on Marooner's Rock. But a kite slipped by, and Peter tied it around Wendy's waist. It carried her off into the sky, and now Peter Pan had sacrificed himself. Lo and behold, in chapter 9, the Never Bird herself gives the nest up to Peter in order for him to sail to safety. Peter takes care of the eggs and puts them in a hat for the Never Bird to create a new nest out of, and then he's all safe and sound. The Lost Boys were very excited by the adventure. Everyone came back okay, and they even got to stay up a little later than bedtime, which, if we're going outside of just plot summary, again alludes to that idea of the childlike fantasy of the book and the ways that the book is fantastic for children and definitely targeted towards a child audience, but also as we saw from the scuffle of Peter and Captain Hook and the others, it contains adult themes as well as adult lessons and morals, especially adolescent lessons and morals. So anyway, here we are in chapter 10, The Happy Home. We're going to pick up reading there, and if you want to follow along with today's reading, go ahead and click the link that's in the video description below. That link will take you to Peter Pan on Project Gutenberg, and then you just have to go to chapter 10, okay, The Happy Home. One important result of the brush with the pirates on the lagoon was that it made the Redskins the Lost Boys' friends. Peter had saved Tiger Lily from a dreadful fate, and now there was nothing she and her braves would not do for him. All night they sat above, keeping watch over the home under the ground and awaiting the big attack by the pirates, which obviously could not be much longer delayed. Even by day they hung about, smoking the pipe of peace and looking almost as if they wanted titbits to eat. They called Peter the Great White Father, prostrating themselves, lying down before him, and he liked this tremendously, so that it was not really good for him. "The Great White Father," he would say to them in a very lordly manner as they groveled at his feet, "is glad to see the Pickaninny warriors protecting his wigwam from the pirates." "Me Tiger Lily," the lovely creature would reply. "Peter Pan saved me. Me his very nice friend. Me no let pirates hurt him." She was far too pretty to cringe in this way, but Peter thought it his due, and he would answer condescendingly, "It is good. Peter Pan has spoken." Although when he said Peter Pan has spoken, it meant that they must now shut up, and they accepted it humbly in that spirit. They were by no means so respectful to the other boys, whom they looked upon as just ordinary braves. They said "how do" to them, and things like that, and what annoyed the boys was that Peter seemed to think this was quite all right. Secretly, Wendy sympathized with them a little, but she was far too loyal a housewife to listen to any complaints against Father. "Father knows best," she always said, whatever her private opinion must be. Her private opinion was that the Redskins should not call her a squaw. Now, guys, this is interesting. Again, J.M. Barrie is using childlike scenes and moments in order to display very adult, realistic situations from the time period. In that time period, women were known to be particularly reverent to their husbands, or they saw their husbands in a reverent light, and they were definitely dedicated to doing what their husbands needed. And it didn't really matter what their own personal feminine human opinions were. when the husband wanted something or said something was so. In the time of J.M. Barrie, it was simply so. And let's do a little reminder of when this book came out. So if you want to pause really quick, you can go to Google and exercise your research skills by typing in something in order to figure out when this book was written. So if you want to do that right now, go ahead and pause the video, type it in, find your answer, and see if we come up with the same thing. Okay, good. It looks like he wrote the 1904 play of Peter Pan, and we're reading the 1911 novel. Okay, so we're talking about right at the turn of the 20th century. Automobile cars had just really come into prominent city life. People were still definitely driving horses around. Women had not yet gained the right to vote. When this book came out, they were 9 years away from being able to vote. And so it's hardly a surprise that J.M. Barrie is pointing out the subservience that women were facing in the homes of men. And he's using a really friendly theme by having Wendy be subservient to Peter. But trust me, it's definitely a lot larger and a lot more adult than it's presented here in this fantastic story. We have now reached the evening that was to be known among them as the Night of Nights, because of its adventures and their upshot. The day, as if quietly gathering its forces, had been almost uneventful, and now the redskins in their blankets were at their posts above, while below the children were having their evening meal, all except Peter, who had gone out to get the time. The way he got time on the island was to find the crocodile and then stay near him till the clock struck. The meal happened to be a make-believe tea, and they sat around the board guzzling in their greed. And really, what with their chatter and recriminations, the noise, as Wendy said, was positively deafening. To be sure, she did not mind noise, but she simply would not have them grabbing things and then excusing themselves by saying that Toodles had pushed their elbow. There was a fixed rule that they must never hit back at meals, but should refer the matter of dispute to Wendy by raising the right arm politely and saying, "I complain of so-and-so." But what usually happened was that they forgot to do this, or they did it too much. "Silence," cried Wendy, when for the 20th time she had told them that they were not all to speak at once. "Is your mug empty, Slightly, darling?" "Not quite empty, Mummy," Slightly said, after looking into an imaginary mug. "He hasn't even begun to drink his milk," Nibs interposed. This was telling, and Slightly seized his chance. "I complain of Nibs," he cried promptly. John, however, had held up his hand first. "Well, John?" "May I sit in Peter's chair as he is not here?" "Sit in father's chair, John," Wendy was scandalized. "Certainly not." "He is not really our father," John answered. "He didn't even know how a father does till I showed him." This was grumbling. "We complain of John," cried the twins. Toodles held up his hand. He was so much the humblest of them, indeed he was the only humble one, that Wendy was specially gentle with him. "I don't suppose," Toodles said diffidently, "that I could be father." "No, Toodles." Once Toodles began, which was not very often, he had a silly way of going on. "As I can't be father," he said heavily, "I don't suppose, Michael, you would let me be the baby." "No, I won't," Michael rapped out. He was already in his basket. "As I can't be the baby," Toodles said, getting heavier and heavier and heavier, "do you think I could be a twin?" "No, indeed," replied the twins. "It's awfully difficult to be a twin." "As I can't be anything important," said Toodles, "would any of you like to see me do a trick?" "No," they all replied. Then at last he stopped. "I hadn't really any hope," he said. The hateful telling broke out again. Slightly's coughing on the table. The twins began with cheesecakes. Curly's taking both butter and honey. Nibs is speaking with his mouth full. "I complain of the twins. I complain of Curly. I complain of Nibs." Oh dear, cried Wendy. "I'm sure I sometimes think that spinsters are to be envied." She told them to clear away and sat down to her work basket, a heavy load of stockings and every knee with a hole in it as usual. "Wendy," remonstrated Michael, "I'm too big for a cradle." "I must have somebody in a cradle." cradle, she said almost tartly. You are the littlest. A cradle is a nice homely thing to have about the house. While she sewed, they played around her, such a group of happy faces and dancing limbs lit up by that romantic fire. It had become a very familiar scene, this, in the home under the ground, but we are looking on it for the very last time. There was a step above, and Wendy, you may be sure, was the first to recognize it. Children, I hear your father's step. He likes you to meet him at the door. Above, the redskins crouched before Peter. Watch well, braves, I have spoken. And then, as so often before, the gay children dragged him from his tree. As so often before, but after this, never again. He had brought nuts for the boys, as well as the correct time for Wendy. Peter, you just spoiled them, you know, Wendy simpered. Ah, old lady, said Peter, hanging up his gun. It was me told him mothers are called old lady, Michael whispered to Curly. I complain of Michael, said Curly instantly. The first twin came to Peter. Father, we want to dance. Dance away, my little man, said Peter, who was in good humor. But we want you to dance. Peter was really the best dancer among them, but he pretended to be scandalized. Me? My old bones would rattle. And Mummy, too. What? Cried Wendy. The mother of such an armful dance? But on a Saturday night, slightly insinuated. It was not really Saturday night, at least it may have been, for they had lost count of the days, but always if they wanted to do anything special, they said this was Saturday night, and then they did it. Of course it is Saturday night, Peter, Wendy said, relenting. People of our figure, Wendy, but it is only among our own progeny. True, true. So they were told they could dance, but they must put on their nighties first. Ah, old lady, Peter said to Wendy, warming himself by the fire and looking down at her as she sat turning a heel. There's nothing more pleasant of an evening for you and me when the day's toil is over than to rest by the fire with the little ones nearby. It is sweet, Peter, isn't it? Wendy said, frightfully gratified. Peter, I think Curly has your nose. Michael takes after you. She went to him and put her hand on his shoulder. Dear Peter, she said, with such a large family, of course, I've now passed my best, but you don't want to exchange me, do you? No, Wendy. Certainly he did not want to change, but he looked at her uncomfortably, blinking, like one not sure whether he was awake or asleep. Peter, Wendy said, what is it? I was just thinking, he said, a little scared. It's only make-believe, isn't it, that I'm their father? Oh, yes, Wendy said primly. You see, he continued apologetically, it would make me seem so old to be their real father. But they are ours, Peter, yours and mine. But not really, Wendy, he said anxiously. Not if you don't wish it, she replied, and she distinctly heard a sigh of relief. Peter, she asked, trying to speak firmly, what are your exact feelings about me? Those of a devoted son, Wendy. I thought so, she said, and went and sat by herself at the extreme end of the room. You are so queer, he said, frankly puzzled. And Tiger Lily is just the same. There's something she wants me to be, but she says it is not my mother. No, indeed it's not, Wendy replied with frightful emphasis. Now we know why she was prejudiced against the Redskins. Then what is it? It isn't for a lady to tell. Oh, very well, Peter said, a little nettled. Perhaps Tinkerbell will tell me. Oh, yes, Tinkerbell will tell you, Wendy retorted scornfully. She's an abandoned little creature. Here, Tink, who was in her bedroom, eavesdropping, squeaked out something impudent. She says she glories in being abandoned, Peter interpreted. He had a sudden idea. Perhaps Tink wants to be my mother. You silly ass, cried Tinkerbell in a passion. She had said it so often that Wendy needed no translation. I almost agree with her, Wendy snapped. Fancy, Wendy snapping. But she had been much tried, and she little knew what was to happen before the night was out. If she had known, she would not have snapped. None of them knew. Perhaps it was best not to know. Their ignorance gave them one more glad hour, and as it was to be their last hour on the island, let us rejoice that there were 60 glad minutes in it. They sang and danced in their nightgowns. Such a deliciously creepy song it was, in which they pretended to be frightened at their own shadows, little witting that so soon shadows would close in upon them, for whom they would shrink in real fear. So uproariously gay was the dance, and how they buffeted each other on the bed and out of it. It was a pillow fight rather than a dance, and when it was finished, the pillows insisted on one bout more, like partners who know that they may never meet again. The stories they told before it was time for Wendy's goodnight story even slightly tried to tell a story that night, but the beginning was so fearfully dull that it appalled not only the others but himself. And he said gloomily, "Yes, it is a dull beginning. I say, let us pretend that it's the end." And then, at last, they all got into bed for Wendy's story. The story they loved the best. The story that Peter hated. Usually, when she began to tell this story, he left the room or put his hands over his ears. And possibly, if he had done either of those things this time, they might all still be on the island. But tonight he remained on his stool, and we shall see what happened. Okay, we bolstered through chapter 10. We're right at the beginning of chapter 11. There are plenty of things to be said or done or talked about with chapter 10. We have some symbolism there involving the actions and conversations between Wendy and Peter. We have interesting development in the plot. The characterization of the story is obviously changing because the relationship between Wendy and Peter is becoming strained. And there's also a notion of conflict on the horizon. Some foreshadowing being done by Barrie, again breaking the fourth wall in order to let us know via dramatic irony that the characters are in for no good pretty soon here. So with all of that said, and with all of those things being done in chapter 10, I would like for you, for homework, to go through chapter 10 and write a response based on some literary element. Please indicate whether you're using conflict, setting, plot, characterization, theme, tone, or mood, any of those different things. And if you're, whatever one you choose, I want you to write a paragraph explaining how that one is being demonstrated in chapter 10. And if you really want to go above and beyond, you can write about how, maybe if you're writing about, say, characterization, how the characters of Wendy and Peter or the Lost Boys or whoever you focus on relate to people in real life. Or if you're writing about the setting, you can write about not just how that setting exists in chapter 10, but how it relates to real life. So again, the homework is to take chapter 10, write about some element of literature that functions within chapter 10, and if you want to go above and beyond, translate that element of literature not just to how it functions in chapter 10, but how it functions in real life via the examples in chapter 10. That's your homework. If you want, you can submit it to Zoom. My Zoom calls are every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8:30 to 9 a.m. in the morning, and then 2 to 2:30 p.m. early afternoon. Or you can email me your homework, and I can receive it that way. Don't forget to keep watching the videos and doing the homework, because that gets you entered in the $25 gift card drawing at the end of every week. And without anything left to go over, I will bid you adieu. I hope you have a wonderful day. See you later.